Being an Avenger or being a member of the Justice League?
I think I'd be a West Coast Avenger. Just chill, relax.
Yeah.
Our biggest villain.
A Great Lakes Avenger.
Yeah, I was going to say,
actually,
I would like the Great Lakes Avenger.
Yeah. I want that. That's us.
Great Lakes Avenger, no doubt. Hey, welcome to the Infinity Bros podcast, the only podcast that is perfectly balanced, as all things should be. I am your host, Max Mosier, back here today to talk about Captain America 4 Brave New World. And I totally muffed how I was said that, but it's neither here nor there. I'm nervous because I'm back hosting for the first time in forever, it feels like. I am not alone today, though. I am joined by two other Infinity Bros. First, all the way out west, it's Infinity Bro Jarret. Jarret, how are we?
I'm doing fantastic. Got to see Cap 4 on Valentine's Day weekend, which was phenomenal. And so I'm ready to talk shop with the boys.
And he is the Red Wing to my Captain America. It is Mark Jones. Mark, how are you?
I'm great, but I feel like I'm more of the shield to your Captain America.
Or the wings, dare I say.
No, the shield.
And I'm the wind beneath your wings.
The wind.
And you are the leader, Jarret. That's who you are. Well, Mark, how you doing?
Doing great. Glad you're back hosting.
Yeah, okay.
Can't wait for this back and forth. Or maybe it's going to get awkward and weird because you've been away for so long.
Our chemistry is out of control right now. Like, I don't know what the people are going to do. They're subscribing so fast.
I'm third wheeling so hard right now. It's uncomfortable.
Does anybody else have butterflies in their tummy?
Yeah.
I do. Well, Mark, thanks for being here, I guess. We're going to keep this awkward shtick going, I guess. It wasn't.
Thank you for being here. I've been with
Isaac
and everyone else, except for you.
No. Yeah,
I'm sorry. Gosh. You can't see it in an audio medium, but Mark did just pull out a whole bouquet of flowers and a box of chocolates. And it is getting steamy over there.
Well, and Mark wore a polo today, and I appreciate that. He dressed up for the podcast, and I appreciate that about him.
What I wear to work. I know you wear just sweatshirts and slacks. You know, it is.
I don't wear sweatshirts and slacks to work. I have to wear business casual now.
Exactly. He's a cool, hip campus pastor, you know.
That's not how that works. I'm forced to dress nice. That's how it works.
Hey kids, you know who's also not like us? Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
that's Max.
He brings up
boom, boom, boom. Hey, you guys heard of a little rapper called Kendrick Lamar?
Never heard of her.
Well, we did have a little bit of a mess around before this, so the chemistry is there more than you think. We have a special exclusive Patreon that you can subscribe to for the low price of $2 a month. We highly recommend you do it. You could hear many questions be answered prior to the show. You could hear, did Mark choose Mjolnir or Wonder Woman's Lasso of Truth? Did Jarret choose Doctor Strange's magic or Green Lantern's power ring? And did Mark and I choose Loki's chicory or Joker's chaos? And more. There's your plug. Go check it out. We're going to review Captain America 4 today, Brave New World, that was just released last week over Valentine's Day weekend. I just want to give you a heads up, though, before we continue any forward in this podcast. You need to know it's going to be a spoiler podcast. Everything from this point on will be a spoiler. So this is your official spoiler warning.
This is...
Prepare yourself.
An Infinity Bros.
Prepare yourself.
Spoiler. Warning.
And additionally, we're going to rate things on this podcast using our unique rating system. If you're not familiar with that and this is your first time checking us out, we're going to plug that promo right here.
Here on the Infinity Bros podcast, everything is ranked from a 0 to 6 point scale. 0 meaning horrible and 6 meaning absolutely excellent. If all of the Infinity Bros rank something a 6, it gets an Infinity Step.
Captain America Brave New World stars a slew of Marvel actors. Anthony Mackie stars as Sam Wilson, Captain America. Harrison Ford steps in to the role of President Thaddeus Ross, in particular, in this movie. Danny Ramirez makes his movie debut as Joaquin Torres. Shira Haas plays Ruth Bat Seraph. Carl Lumbly returns from Captain America and the Winter Soldier TV series as Isaiah Bradley. And then we've already plugged the spoiler portion of this. So Tim Blake Nelson makes his return from the Incredible Hulk as Samuel Stearns. He's not called the leader in this exclusively, but for the sake of this podcast, that's what I'm going to call him. And then Giancarlo Esposito plays Sidewinder. And Mark, I'm very interested to hear what you have to say about this character in particular. There's a slew of others, but those are the main cast. This one was directed by Julius Ona and written by Rob Edwards, Malcolm Spellman, and Delan Musan. It released last week, as I said. It's an hour and 58 minutes long, and it is officially, my understanding is this is part of Phase 5. This is kicking off, or at least in some point in Phase 5 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Before we dive into sections of this movie, we're going to go ahead and review it. So, Jarret, why don't you go ahead and give us your rating and your review of this movie?
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 6. It's super funny if you check out the Patreon. Mark actually called this shot head on. I really enjoyed this movie. I don't think it's comparable to something like Winter Soldier, Civil War, or even like the success of Guardians 3, which is what's holding it back from maybe a 5.5 or a 6. But it was still highly enjoyable, and I would say probably one of the best, probably number 2 of the post Endgame Marvel movies. I think it did a lot to set off the future for what we're looking at going forward in the Marvel universe, and I thought it was great to see this sort of changing of the guard and this optimistic hope of what they might have for a future Avengers, what that might look like. So, all in all, it was a fun watch. I really, really enjoyed it. Again, didn't quite hold a candle to some of the all-time Marvel greats, but still fantastic watch.
Mark, the movie is reportedly, as of February 18th, made over $108 million. It does need to be in about middle 230 millions to break even based on production and promotion budget. So it is on its way across worldwide as we're recording this on February 20th. What's your rating of this, Mark?
My rating is a 5.25 out of 6.
Wow.
I would say like the going with the trailer first. I would say the trailer was pretty much lukewarm the whole time, but I was all in initially when it was called New World Order, and then hearing that some wrestlers were going to be in the Serpent Society, I was all in. But then all that kind of got scrapped and out the window. But that's just ancillary to the stuff. Thought the movie was good. It definitely pushed the narrative along, and I think it had an end credit scene that also pushed the story as well, because we've not had that in the last few movies in the MCU. I think Anthony Mackie does a great job of humanizing Captain America, or at least the role of Captain America in our new world, in our brave new world. Pardon the pun. We had some good cameos. I think Harrison Ford really went above what we're kind of used to with this role. I do wish that the previous actor hadn't passed away a few years ago, because I would have liked to seen him take up this role and see him act and see his chops. I do find it awesome that in the new wave of things, having the Fox properties in, and Kevin Feige clearly having an idea to bring back what we grew up on with heroes, and indicative to Edward Blake Nelson coming back 17 years later, even though he was in the second Marvel movie, but just like that thought process, it's like, what else is he going to pull off from previous movies down the road? But other than that, I really loved the storyline they went with this. Carlos Esposito blew my socks off for being. I was really surprised with him being a little bit older. I was like, I was going with maybe a younger guy with that role, but it was good. There's a lot of hate online. I don't know what that's all about. I think we're just in a world where people just want to hate on stuff. But so that's my thoughts.
Hate specifically for Giancarlo Esposito, or
Just
like
the movie in general.
as a whole? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've heard nothing bad about Giancarlo Esposito, but
Yeah, the hate Mark is referring to is it holds a 49% approval rating right now on Rotten Tomatoes. Its Metacritic score is currently 42 out of 100. And its
Oh, wow.
cinema score, which it weighs kind of audiences that are polled on top of reviews, it's a B minus, which is the lowest rated Marvel Cinematic Universe movie ever.
Wow.
One quote, The Atlantic criticized the film for failing to deliver on its politically charged premise, describing it as a disjointed narrative that focuses too heavily on resolving old MCU plot lines. I am lower on this than you guys are. I give it a 4 out of 6. But I think just that's comparable to me to Thor, which I give a 4 out of 6, Eternals, which I give a 4 out of 6. And the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, which I gave a 4 out of 6. I think this is a good movie. I do not think it's a great movie. And if you listen to our last episode, we did the Stanley's last episode, I guess, but the episode before that, Robbie and I both were really saying, hey, we got really high expectations for this movie because they've got a lot to do in a very short time to get us to Secret Wars and Doomsday. And I just don't feel like it did that. But that wasn't my expectation going into this after I heard the critics ratings. Once I heard those critics ratings, I was like, all right, that's not going to happen. So let's go in with a fresh perspective and hope for the best. I look at this one as one of the first times that I'm like, man, Marvel Studios might have been the problem here, in the sense that the writing and the filmmaking was just not there. Whereas I like all the actor choices they made. I think Anthony Mackie has earned the right to have this movie, and I think he did very well in it. I think Harrison Ford was a brilliant move to bring him into that role after William Hurt passed away. And I think they made a better choice with Esposito taking this on, Mark, versus Roman Reigns. I was that who was supposed to do it? It was Roman Reigns, right?
No. It was always Esposito with this role. It just they were going to have more Serpent Society members.
Sure. I think it was a wise choice to put him there.
But yeah.
Seth Rollins, sorry, forgive me. I was just disappointed at the story, and I blame the writers for that. I think there's about 5 great stories in here that you could have done. You could do Thaddeus Ross responding to being a president. You could continue the storyline of the TV show of, is Captain America able to be this Captain America? You could have talked about the leader and really gotten into how he does all this like equating and things like that. There was a lot of talk, not a lot of show with that. I really loved the dynamic of Sam doubting himself and comparing himself to Steve. I felt like in the TV show, it was really based on race. It would have been great to see him literally be in his shadow in this one. I would go as far as to say, I think it'd be great if they didn't even tell us about Hulk. I think that was a huge miss from Marvel to tell us about. I understand why they did it, but
Yeah.
it really just, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze there in regards to what happened there. So I give it a 4 out of 6. There's a lot of great things in this movie that I really liked, but the bad really is a slog for me. So I don't hate it. This is one of the most mixed Marvel movies I've ever watched, because there's parts where I'm like, that's amazing. And I'm with you guys. And then there's other parts where they're doing exposition and I'm going, who wrote this? What are we doing here? It felt like I've been watching the old Fantastic Four movies with my kids and the old Marvel movies back in the day where it's like, what are we doing here? And it felt like that sometimes. And I'm concerned. I'm really concerned about Marvel, I think, in general. But we do this every other movie, right, Mark? I do this every other movie.
Well,
the next movie is going to be really good. That's what's going to happen now.
Well, I think Thunderbolt, and this is another thing, I think people did expect a lot more from this movie and to really push harder on the next thing coming up. But what did get established, I feel like gets overlooked a lot, is Sam is now going to start collecting Avengers.
Yes.
That's a big thing. He's going to be the new leader. He's going to start getting people together to be like, hey, something, and now especially with the end credit scene, he's like, something big's coming. We got to be prepared. We can't be like what it was with Thanos. So my hope is now with Thunderbolts, do we get a Sam Wilson Captain America cameo? One would think we would have to, with Bucky being involved, but
You kind of hit something, and I think you nailed a feeling that I had about halfway through this movie, where there is a 6 out of 6 version of this movie out there somewhere in my mind, where you really lean into this new version of Howard or Stern, whatever his name is, not Howard Stern.
Yeah. The leader.
Where you lean into the more like almost like horrific aspect of it. I want you to go as dark as Doctor Strange did, as I would say even to some degree Winter Soldier did. And the reason why I think is because they kind of gave us a taste of that. And there is this thing going on in Hollywood where everybody is coming out with these amazing psychological thriller horror shows, and they're doing well, right? Like the big thing right now is like robots, humanized robots, blah, blah, blah. But, you look at like the Jordan Peele stuff, right? And I think if you have that version of Stern and really lean into the creepy aspect and never bring up Red Hulk in the previews and just have him genuinely be terrifying at the end, I think there's a version of that movie out there that's a 6 out of 6.
Even, I'll go this far, Jarret. I think the post-credit scene was trash. And I think a huge reason why I think it was trash, and I stand by that still, is they didn't show me that the leader was calculated. It would have been great if on his desk he has a picture of a wormhole or time travel
Okay,
or
so in your mind, like in that scene where he's talking about it, we like pan back to the desk, and like, if we
yeah.
remember, it's like he didn't look down on the desk, and like down on the desk is like a picture or some like captured footage of like maybe, like you say, the wormhole opening up, and then you see like the Fantastic Four coming through or something like that. Is that, or
I'm
Doctor
thinking more
Doom?
of like it would be great if he was like he somehow had some type of evidence of like what happened in Spider-Man with other universes being there. Or
Have you guys read The End? The like Ultimates The End, the
yep,
616 The End? Okay.
yep.
I think that's what you're getting at is like when we see the incursions happening where the realities are like colliding in on each other, it's palpable. Like you can tell it's happening, and like families are getting ripped apart and stuff. And like if you tee him up to be somebody that can see that coming and even show us like a glimpse of that, I think then that holds more weight. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at, Max.
I just think he was a mustache twirling villain who he didn't have any depth. He looked terrible in my opinion. I think the leader was one of the weakest parts of this.
Disagree.
I
Strongly
think
disagree. I loved how he
Yeah.
looked.
hated how he looked.
Well, I don't think
I
people
wanted the
would have-
original way of the comics. I
Sure,
wanted
but
that.
the casual fan would have been like, "That's too goofy. He looks like
Sure.
a giant headed
I get that.
Frankenstein." Like that's what they would have done.
I like how horrifying he looks. I like that they made him like half blind and his brain like rotting out the side of his head.
I am all in on Jarrett's thought that there should have been more like, what's happening in the background, like horrific stuff that the leader's doing. But I think they were tied down with not letting him or keeping him in that prison. I think that's where we get kind of his storyline. I could see gets stale because he's in one spot.
I get
and then
that.
he gets captured.
I just think to Jarret, the point we were talking about originally, there's about 5 or 6 stories in this. Stick with 2 and let's go.
Mhm.
Pick the 2 you want and let's go. And I think the 2 you want the psychological thriller of mind control and who else was he mind controlling and blah, 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 blah. Connect to Incredible Hulk. A lot of people are dogging that. I think it's a great call. I think that was a great choice. I loved that actually. Like Betty Ross, we'll talk about Betty at the end here, but like her coming in was like great moment. And the Isaiah Bradley stuff, him going back to jail, great stuff. And I just think there's a couple movies in here. You nailed it, Jarret. I think there's a great movie in here. And you give it to like a Coogler, or you give it to a Jordan Peele, or you give it to a guy or a gal who could really write a good script and really get behind the camera. I think they could have done it. And I feel for the cast because it's a lot. So let's go ahead and go beat by beat and talk about this movie all together. We find out that 5 months after Ross is elected president, which is the opening scene. Did you guys like the introduction to Harrison Ford as Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross?
No, it was weird to open on like that and then immediately pivot to 5 months later. They were like, da 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 da. This is who he used to be 5 months later. Like, just go to the 5 months. Like, what was the point of that whole? You could cut out the whole first 2 minutes of the movie and it would still work.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I know people had talked about the pacing of this seemed off, but for me, I was pretty much locked in the whole time until we got to that final fight scene. Then it kind of didn't really. Anyways, but moving on, I thought it was good. I thought it was just. I think it helped for like the casual fans to be like, "Hey, you remember the other guy with the mustache? This is this guy. That's who this is."
Right.
That's why I felt.
That makes sense.
Like they had to do that for the casual fans. Like that's where we're at now. There's so many movies.
Yeah.
In the Marvel universe. That we're going to get some of this where it's like, hey, remember people, it's just like reading your first comic book. Here's what happened in the past. And then you move forward.
And I don't fault them for that. I will actually, I don't think I'll ever fault them for that. I think a lot of people dog that and I won't. Sam Wilson is sent by Ross with his new Falcon, Joaquin Torres. I'm going to call him Falcon the rest of the episode. They go to Mexico to stop an illegal sale of stolen classified items by the Serpent Society. That's where we get introduced to Sidewinder, played by Esposito. And what did you think of this fight scene, guys? Because I'll be transparent. This was a rough start to me. I thought the fighting was really clunky in this. I've seen this Captain America's style of fighting already in the TV show, and I think there was more there. And I did not think they showcased this well on the front end. I was a little disappointed. Outside of him falling on the ground,
I think
and then
the
going,
first fight scene was to show us what his wings and what he can do with his suit. I think that was more of the focus than his actual fighting.
Sure.
I actually really like the hand-to-hand combat scene because it reminds you that this is just a dude, right? Like,
Right.
Yeah.
he's not fighting at the Winter Soldier level, right? He's
Right.
not fighting
Right.
at a Steve Rogers level. This is just a dude from the army, and he looks pretty weak. I mean, he ends up winning the fight, but he looks like he's struggling. And I think that's a theme that they peppered in there, but didn't really like land the plane as well on. But I saw the vision that they were going for there, and I kind of appreciated that.
And I wanted that, Jarret. I wanted that the whole movie. Because I'm like, that builds to this Hulk fight.
Yeah.
Builds to the Hulk fight. I'm with you. I was right there with you. I'll talk about a scene later where I think they went downhill with it. Wilson and Torres trained with Isaiah Bradley. I got to tell you, Jarret, 6 out of 6 on Isaiah Bradley in this. He was one of the best parts of the movie.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, the TV show was good. But after the TV show, one of the things I said after that was, hey, this needed to be about race given the context, especially the time frame in America at the time of what was going on in 2021, 2022 is when that came out. But I was like, well, let's move past that. It can be said once in a while, but let's move past it. But I think bringing him into this was a great choice, especially given what happens at the White House. And I loved that. What did you guys think of Isaiah Bradley being back in this movie?
I thought it was a cool addition. I think they're teeing him up too to allow us to see the Young Avengers, which we've seen like the pepperings of here and there. And his character, I think, was very like integral to this. I'll talk about it here because I don't know if it'll come up again. But this is almost beat for beat the same story as Winter Soldier, which I kind of was very surprised by. Right? You have somebody who's brainwashed, accused of something that they're not actually guilty of, who is a super soldier, right? And there's this like genius leader behind the scenes pulling the string who happens to be somebody that was wrong in the past, right? They follow that formulaically all the way through. And I think the only part of that story that actually really worked for me was that if he is invested on anybody, if Cap is invested on anybody, it's going to be Isaiah Bradley. That is the only motivation for him to do all the things that he's doing. I would say even if it was Bucky, I don't see him being as heavily invested personally as he is here. And I think because he relates to what happened to Bradley throughout history and the fact that he feels responsible for him, I loved him. I thought he was the best part of this movie.
Yeah, I liked Isaiah Bradley in it. Good. My thought from it is they're setting this up for Isaiah Bradley to sacrifice himself for the team. That's what I kind of got out of it. I think he's going to be involved with, probably the Avengers and training. So I think this isn't the last time we see Isaiah Bradley in the MCU.
I think it'd be great if in the next movie he passes away, trying maybe saving Kate Bishop or, an Avenger who maybe doesn't have a stronger power set. That would be a really cool thing to tie not just his story, but somebody else's story to him.
And we might get Coulson. He's the Agent Coulson of getting the Avengers together.
Yeah, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
I have a super out there theory. It's probably wrong, but it's been floating around in my head.
Let's go to the weeds, Jarret. Let's go.
Yeah, I want to see Isaiah Bradley eventually as the man on the wall, if you've read like Original Sins. And I want him to somehow they find him, and I want somebody to take that mantle, like a Bucky or obviously it's Bucky in the comics. I don't know who it would be in the TV shows, but I want him to eventually like lead us outside of the scope of the planet and start getting into more celestial side, because obviously like we kind of playing that in Captain Marvel, and now that the Guardians is done, like we don't really have that avenue anymore. And so for me, him being as old as he is and slowing down, I want to see him take up that mantle as the man on the wall and lead us into a more celestial version of.
What are you talking about, Jarret? The Eternals are still out there.
We're not going to talk about the Eternals.
Speaking of actually, we are going to talk about the Eternals.
We finally got the Celestial back.
The celestial island of Tiamat is back, and Ross reveals that the plan that he has through the whole movie, and basically one of the key plot points, is he wants to sign a treaty with multiple countries to take the resource that is on here, and we get our first official introduction to adamantium, which was the product that Captain America saved, thrusting this mantle into the conversation of a political espionage. Adamantium, quick thoughts. We all know the Wolverine connection and the X-Men connection, but other thoughts aside from that?
This is so stupid. There's an interview out there where the writers talk about how they needed a MacGuffin, and they stumbled upon the fact that Tiamat was still in the ocean, and so they just made it adamantium. And I'm
What do you
like,
mean they stumbled? What does that mean?
that's literally the phrase they use, that they stumbled upon this as a MacGuffin. Like, and I'm like, yeah, because you guys forgot it was there and have not mentioned it for so many movies. That they're like, oh yeah, we have this thing that we forgot that would shift the gravity of the planet.
And
And
this is what I'm talking about, Jarret, with
yeah,
Marvel. This is just what I'm talking about. I think this has gotten too big for Feige. I think he's lost a couple of producers.
yeah.
He needs a couple, and unfortunately, there's either too many cooks in the kitchen or not enough cooks to make sure that the sauce is tasting good. And I just think right now, Marvel's got a huge storyboard problem, like huge
That's the
issue
thing.
here.
How
Sorry,
at,
Mark.
how at this point do you not have someone hired, or like three people hired that know all the story, like their whole job is like, you know, all the details of every movie, and go to every like sit in, like they're not, and just be like, hey, remember this happened. Hey, don't forget this is a thing. Like with, because yeah, I saw that. I think I know which one you're talking about, Jarret. Where it's like, how would you get hired and not kind of know all the lore that's in the 616? Like I just,
Yeah.
this is why they need to hire us. They need to hire Infinity Bros and write the rest of their movies so they can make billions of dollars.
And here's the crazy thing is, like, Marvel on the comic book side does this very well, right? Like, there obviously there's continuity errors across all the properties because that's how comic books work. But they have a through line where it's like, no, we need to make sure that this what's happening in this comic aligns with this comic, or if something big is happening in New York, obviously Spider-Man's going to be affected. The Fantastic Four are going to be, like, Daredevil's going to be affected, and like, grab Axel Alonso or whoever the current version of that is in Marvel and just say, like, hey, how do you guys do this? How do you keep these balls juggling in the air? But Disney doesn't really care. They're just kind of milking it. You know, it like really seems like they're not invested anymore in
It's
putting
getting
out.
old.
Yeah,
It's getting old fast. When it happened, like right after Endgame, it was kind of like, all right, whatever, you're getting your footing, you're getting it figured out. But we've had a couple of years of this now, and it's just getting kind of obnoxious and
they
weird.
can't blame COVID anymore. You can't. Like,
Well, but also, are we at the, like I mentioned the Patreon about fans just being, I think, more critical? Like, are we just at that point where we expect, because we have some nostalgia, like, you know, we hold those movies at such high praise because it, you know, came out at a pre-COVID times, that we as a society can't just take this in?
I would agree with that if Disney didn't just like force feed dozens of TV shows down our throat on Disney Plus. I think just like that's the only reason I push back on it. And I granted the context of that is COVID, right? As Jarret pointed out earlier. So I don't know. We could talk about that all day. We talk about that on the show a lot. I'm gonna keep going. The song Mr. Blue plays, triggering mind controlling controlled assassins, excuse me. This includes Bradley, who unknowingly attacks Ross. And this is where we get Ruth Bat Seraph. Ross is head of security. She apprehends the attackers. You get Captain America gets into action. Falcon gets into action. And this is where we kind of just through it happens kind of in a weird way, guys. The way Cap finds all this out, I just didn't like the writing in this. I didn't like how he just stood there and he kind of did the trope where he's like, this means this. This means this. We got to go here. Like, I really felt it was lazy. I guess let's go back to Isaiah Bradley. What did you think of him getting put behind bars, Jarret? You said this is the best part of the movie. Why do you think this is one of the best parts of the movie?
I think this version of Cap, right, is very much invested in where he comes from culturally and also what he represents as like a regular guy for the most part taking up this mantle. And he feels very connected to Isaiah Bradley, right? Like we saw that throughout the whole TV series. And I do think you missed that context. If you didn't watch the TV series, go back and see sort of the path that led here. But he needed something to be invested in this. And as clumsy as the Tiamat and adamantium stuff felt, I felt like this one was intentional, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I like how almost horrified with himself Isaiah Bradley looks when they capture him, sort of surround him with the police, and he's like, I can't survive behind bars again. Like, you
Yeah.
don't know what that does to me. And I think it's a good, like, sobering moment where it's like, no, we as watchers are now invested in this because we don't want him to go through this again. Like, he bears like the physical and the mental scars of it. And so yeah, I think they really teed that up well. I think that's one of the few plot points that really landed home for me.
Ross realizes that the leader is behind the attacks after Cap traces Sidewinder and the calls back to Camp Echo 1. It's this secret site in West Virginia, and they have to drive there. And this was just the slog of the movie I was referencing in my review. Like, they confront him, and he just reveals he has technology and then just like backs up out of the door and leaves. Like, and this is, Mark, what I talk about the post-credit scene. Like, the reason I'm so low on this is I'm like, you could do things here to make it more sinister. You could show me calculations. You could show me things that happened earlier.
He did make a guy kill himself, so I don't know what more you want with more sinister than that.
That's not it.
He did
I
also
think that is
stop a guy's heart and kill him in cold blood. I think we got pretty... I get what you're saying, where you wanted something bigger, but this dude is calculated. He is cold.
I want the calculation.
And he's a murderer.
Yeah, I get he's a murderer. We got that. He's got a button that he presses and the heart explodes. Yeah, yada, yada, yada.
Well,
I'm saying I want you to show me you calculating. Like, if you got that big nasty brain, it'd be cool to watch him like make calculations on the fly and watch him.
Would you want Zach Galifianakis from Hangover, where you see like
that's it.
numbers around his
There
head?
you go.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. Well, you're off the writing team when we become Marvel.
You solved the problem. Continue on.
I'm gonna hit you with this because, like I said, this is almost beat for beat Winter Soldier, and we get this exact same scene that Max is referencing when we are introduced to the camp below Camp David or whatever it is.
Yeah,
they go down, and there's Arnim Zola, and we see the calculations working on all the computers that are keeping them going. That's what I said, where I was like, this is bad deja vu, right? We've seen a better version of this same scene, and I'm with you on that. The one thing I thought that was cool is, like, where would you put it this time that's not like a military base? And they did Monongahela and the telescope, the radio telescope. I thought that was cool. But everything following them, like, breaking in, is a strictly worse version of us meeting Arnim Zola as a computer. Yeah. You're spot on.
And this is where we get to the good part of the movie, in my opinion. It's like, you get Ford fighting with Japan, and I think that was great.
Before we go into
Harrison
further,
Ford
Max,
was
the one thing we didn't touch on back before Isaiah Bradley tried to kill Thaddeus Ross, that we got a little scene where between Captain America and Thaddeus Ross about starting the Avengers.
Thank you. Yes, go back to that. I'm sorry.
I think that was a big moment in this movie, which is, like I said, if anything, it pushes the narrative of this movie, and I thought that's what I appreciated. So
yeah,
I did miss that. Thanks for saying that. I think also it is a fair question of Sam to go, well, you're the one that put the Accords in place. Now you want me to put it back together? Okay. And Jarret, we're back to the bad deja vu again. We're like, all right, we're retreading Civil War in some ways now because we're going back to that conversation that we spent that basically caused Infinity War.
He does. He asks him, like, what happens when we disagree? Yeah. And they just gloss over it. It's like, okay.
And I think those are the moments that I'm looking for in this movie. Yeah. I'm looking for 2 more minutes of that. I agree with you, Jarret. Let's get rid of the front end part of him getting elected. Let's get rid of it. Let's add 2 more minutes here of that. That seems to me to be a better spot to have that dialogue. And they don't have to pull up anything. That's where he can dunk on him and go, oh, yeah, you remember when half the population came back? And he even acknowledged it.
Yeah.
He acknowledged it. So, Mark, that's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up. This is when we transition to Japan and United States are fighting. Thaddeus Ross is kind of being a jerk. He's getting a little angry and grumpy and agitated.
Because we've kind of got led to, like, we know what's kind of happening because that's what we get when they're at the base, where we see some of the calculations that
and the pills.
Sam
and the pills.
And the pills.
Yep.
But not enough calculations for Max there.
No.
We're looking through all this stuff and the blood work and the scans.
No, that's not calculations. Those were blood work and things.
It's just showing that he's been calculating everyone's move. That's why he's ahead.
I'm talking about the calculations for him talking about a multiverse. I'm saying you cannot drop that this guy knows about a multiverse out of nowhere. And also, I will attack the heart button thing that you brought up later. I think it's stupid. I think it was dumb. He was like, 1 minute, one place. We're going to get to that in a second. I'm moving on. You're getting me all riled up. I'm moving on. Because the best part of the movie is what I want to talk about. The confrontation on Celestial Island. I think this was the best fight scene we've had in a long time in a Marvel movie, which is why I am mixed on this movie. So this is where Bat Seraph She investigates Camp Echo. She helps Wilson and Torres. They talk to Sidewinder. He tells them this plan that's going on. Cap gets the pills to his friend to get them looked at. And this is where the big fight happens, where Stearns takes over the jets, the guys in the jets. They fire on Japan, and all of a sudden it's an air fight. And we've seen clips of this in the trailer. I think this was a tremendous scene. 6 out of 6 on this. This showcases all of Cap's skill set. It also is a rehash and homage to Civil War with Falcon falling out of the sky into the water. That worked for me in this. I think other people will go, oh, they did it again. But for me, I was like, I really liked it. Great fighting. You could tell this was a day one fight that they had in CGI because they've worked their tails off on this. I really liked it. What did you guys think of this fight?
We got Captain America surfboarding a missile. What more do you want?
Yeah, come on. Yes.
That was cool. I liked the fight. Some of the beats didn't quite land. I'm talking before the fight even, because again, I'm getting deja vu. So one, this feels an awful lot like the Cuban Missile scene that we saw in the young version of the X-Men that we got from
First Class.
Yeah, First Class, right? Like, feels very similar there. I want to talk about Seraph real quick, because this was kind of interesting to me. She feels very shoehorned in, and I could not figure out why I couldn't shake that feeling. And afterwards, I realized that she is this, like, Israeli Jewish supervillain, or superhero, I guess, in this technically.
Right.
And I wonder, because it's Disney, and they're trying to, like, sort of be politically involved, but in the softest way possible, I wonder if she was thrown in there because of the stuff going on in Israel and Palestine, or if this was planned from the beginning. Because she feels such like an afterthought, right?
If Walt Disney was still alive, she would have never been cast, and this character would never see the light of day in the MCU.
Yeah. You're right. Yes.
I think Sosha Roquemore, too, who plays Layla Taylor, who's just like Cap's friend. And it's like, who are you? Oh, she's my friend. Okay. We had a lot of friends.
Nothing with that, yeah.
We had a lot of friends in the TV show. We've got all these S.H.I.E.L.D. references. We've got Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Why not put an Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. from the TV show in this role?
Yeah.
I think you're nailing this too, Jarret. In all the controversy that happened before this movie came out around that character too. So I'm glad you brought this up. There was people like, oh, we're boycotting this movie because they're putting an Israeli Jewish individual in this. And Disney stood pat, which credit where credit's due. They stood pat. They didn't drop her. But I'm with you. I was like, what's with all the hoopla here? Like, what? There was nothing. I think these side characters were a waste.
Yeah.
And her in particular, it was like, what are we doing here? Why are you doing this?
The exception to that would obviously be Joaquin Torres. I thought he was phenomenal as a side
I don't think he was
character.
phenomenal. I think he was annoying the first half of the movie. I think the second half of the movie, he figured it out.
It felt quippy. It felt more like Spider-Man than.
And it felt natural,
Very
where it's like
Deadpool.
he's the young guy that asks all the questions, just super arrogant. That's what he plays.
Yeah, I was annoyed in the first half, bought into it in the second half, and that's probably
The
intentional.
second half when he was dead in the water and getting surgery.
Yeah,
when he did have the
when he
talk,
wasn't talking
it was
and
great.
in a hospital bed. Yeah, I really liked that.
I do want to talk about the friend, or that was the aide for Thaddeus Ross.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's one where it's like, how could we have just made that just Sharon Carter? Now that she had
Well, she's
clearance.
Barbara.
Literally anybody else. Yeah.
Or another thing is like, now this is just me making the movie how I now vision it, is at the end when we know that they have a deal and a treaty for, basically they're going to extract animanium because it's all about money, that we see Sharon Carter leading the American group into that. Just a throwback to hey,
she's
he
the
wants
power
100
broker.
soldiers,
Let her be the power
he's the
broker.
power broker, and now the power broker has access to antimanium. So just a little into the weeds, little dip.
I'm not a believer in rewriting a movie. I get what you're saying there, Mark. I think for me, it was just odd having so many side characters
Right.
that just are there. And there's so many dialogues that feel either exposition-y or just wasted. And I think this was another example of that. I thought this fight was great. I loved it. Ross reveals this is where we find out he's dying of heart failure. I think one of the best scenes in the movie is this dialogue between him and Sam Wilson. And this is Sam Wilson Captain America to me. When he's looking at him going dude, you don't have to be that guy. You could be another guy. That's Captain America. And this is why I stand behind Anthony Mackie's portrayal are scenes like that. And Jarret, to your credit and what we've kind of talked about, this is the part of the story I wish they would have hung in on. I wish they would have really leaned into that part of him more. I don't think they did enough. I think they could have had 2 or 3 more of those conversations. Give me over the top Captain America giving too much inspiration to other people. This Cap does it in the comics too. Go read a comic book as of late. He does it too. It's not just Steve Rogers.
Yeah, I agree. And if you're gonna give a reason for why Ross, who like, there's a reason he's called Thunderbolt, right? Like this dude is very against superpowered individuals. He's willing to do whatever it takes. In fact, they talk about like the torture that he inflicted on people, and I like that they leaned into like he's at the end of his life, and he doesn't want to die with regrets, knowing that his daughter can't look him in the eye. As somebody who is a father of 3 kids, like I would do anything for my kids to look me in the eye and not be ashamed of me. And so that to me was the one redeeming thing of this movie is like there were these emotional beats where I felt like they got the spirit of Captain America, right? And Mackie is really leaning into like what's the phrase that they use? Like Steve gave people hope, but you give them something to aspire to be. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, hell yeah.
Great
like,
quote. Great quote.
God, that's Captain America.
Great
right?
quote.
Like that's so good.
Getting back to Ross real quick too. We all agree we bought into the motivation. I think the motivation was brilliant. A lot of people were like, that's pulling a thread too long ago. I'm like, no, that was a great motivation. Betty Ross, brilliant. I think it's great. We get the Red Hulk scene. So Sam discovers about the pills. Mark, you talked about earlier how the leader is ahead of things, and we get to the Red Hulk scene. But before we get to the Red Hulk scene, we get a cameo from Bucky Barnes, and we discover that Bucky Barnes is running for Congress. So Jarret, you just gave the quote from that scene in particular. What did you guys think of this scene? Another homage, Jarret, to Captain America: The Winter Soldier, watching somebody on a table in surgery with people talking and giving deep dialogue. Weird how that works.
I'm really sad that we didn't get to see more of this pair. Not just because like they were fun in the TV show and obviously like the little bit that we get here is like just very charismatic. But these two are really close friends in real life, and I love the way they bounce off of each other. I was actually very shocked that we did not see more of them, but I like this scene. I love the really dumb Marvel jokes where he's like, "Did your speechwriter do this?" or blah blah blah. I love that stuff, dude. I'm here for it. This was one of the best scenes in the movie, in my opinion. And it's short. It doesn't do much other than show Falcon in the bed and sort of tee us up for what happens in Thunderbolts. But yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Just to continue off of what Jarret said, because I would agree, the scene was great. I do like to see another story pusher where it's like, oh, we're gonna get politician Bucky, and then like how is that going to tie in with Thunderbolts? Just more, more that we can speculate on, go into the weeds. I did think like this scene, oh, we're going to get Bucky coming to help Cap in the fight, which I mean we ended up not having that, but I think overall not having another hero help Captain America in this fight was a better move, I thought, even though we probably all wanted Bucky or the Hulk to show up.
I just think it undermines the final scene if Bucky's in it. I was kind of anticipating maybe somebody showing up, but we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Jarret, on that scene. My only gripe is that they made the joke at the end.
I loved it.
I know Marvel makes those jokes, and I know people come to those movies for that. That was a rare moment where I wish Marvel hadn't done it.
Everyone in the theater I was at laughed.
I gotcha.
Were we at a theater where no one laughed? Were you watching it at home or something?
I wish I was watching it at home.
I know.
I think, and again, this goes to what we've talked about in this episode, the thread of Captain America wrestling with who he is. In this scene, they make a joke about they make a serious comment about the serum, then they make the joke, and then we go to the Red Hulk scene, and Captain America says, "Bucky's full of S. I should have taken the serum."
I love that.
And I'm like, that's the joke. I'm like, I'm like, that is the joke. You don't need Bucky's joke because you got the joke there. Make that moment serious, then let that be the joke that wraps around that serious moment. I'm just saying they had it written in already, in my opinion.
This is weird how timely this is, but imagine you're voting in your next congressman, and it's a former war criminal who was who was brainwashed by the Soviet Union.
And like 119 years old or 119.
Yeah. And they're like, yeah, he's the guy.
Or, also in the same realm, hey, we voted this guy in for president who was kind of like a military like monster. And then, yeah, he turned into the Red Hulk and just like whatever. So like the people of America at least have to be so desensitized to just crazy crap happening. We're just like, oh, the president turned into a Hulk? Whatever. Like, hey, half of us got snapped out of existence. And nothing's going to shock us anymore.
Thinking of that Thunderbolts trailer, Mark, and there's like people just getting turned to shadows.
Hey,
trailer.
The torch I've been carrying in this, give us, on this podcast, give us a horror, not Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, like a true horror type of movie.
Yeah.
Where it's like, hey, this villain is like, he's ripping children apart. Like, it's just horrifying. Like, give me, that's maybe a little too far, but you know what I'm saying.
Imagine like a Damage Control series. You know what I mean? Like somebody, like a gritty, like they come in the aftermath of these superhero fights and show like the human cost of like what happens. Dude, we just talked about, on our Stan Lee's, we just talked about the movie Civil War, not the Marvel one. Something like that in the Marvel universe would be so cool. Show like a ground level, like this is what the everyday person experiences living in New York City in a Marvel universe. And it is horrifying.
And you know what? I think that'd be a good change. I like where you're going with that, Jarret, because you literally could just call it something. And then like, as you like whatever, and it's like, okay, it's a Disney movie or like whatever studios they use. Or they probably have to show Marvel, but
yeah,
what would be funny is like we see it happen, and we're like, wait, is that a video of Captain America fighting the Red Hulk? And it's just like that. We just follow like, and they're all background characters, but we're following like a real person without powers, without connections, just navigating this crazy world that is the Marvel Universe.
Well, then we get the Red Hulk scene. Everything culminates together. Oh, actually, time out. I do want to talk about one more thing. I hated after the scene where Cap is talking to Bucky, and then he goes, I need some air. He goes, sits out there. Then all of a sudden, the leader pops up out of nowhere and talks to him outside the hospital. I don't get it. I think the transition was weird. I think the writing was terrible. Didn't get it. Just want to make that note. I think it was terrible writing. Just want to pause and say that.
The leader makes calculated moves.
Yeah.
Probability of him.
You're not showing me. You're telling me.
What do you want?
They're just like, oh, look, I made a calculated move. I'm here now.
You want him like in like on the toilet, like with a pen and paper, like.
No, the guy's like, oh my gosh, they're gamma pills. What? And he looks up. He's like, your heart's gone.
Okay,
that's all it is.
Two things.
Wow,
okay,
the comic movie was being comic-y.
I'm not.
That's what it was.
Hold on. I'm not making a good argument for a 5 out of 6 movie, but the two beats that you have a hard time with, we've seen before. So the one is Obadiah Stane freezing Iron Man in his chair. Technology is. We've seen this. Okay, the scene where he meets him outside the embassy or wherever the hospital. It's the hospital, and he's like shocked that Captain America doesn't see his plan, right? And he seems almost hurt by that. Like, no, we're on the same side. Why don't you realize this? Tell me that's not the Riddler in the new Batman movie.
100%. 100%. It's like, and I don't have a problem with retreading storylines, especially in Marvel movies.
Sure.
I just think they weren't written well, Mark. That's all I'm saying. I think the leader was the right villain for this, for clarity. I think he was. I just don't appreciate how they used him, and he was a weak part of the movie due to writing, not due to actors, not due to anything those guys are doing. I think Tim Blake Nelson, I love him. I think he's weird looking. I think it works great. I just want to see a more calculated version of that. And I think this Sam Wilson, it would have been more fun in this to watch him just constantly fail and be in the mindset of like, man, can I do this? And then go, oh, then we got to fight Red Hulk.
I have one change, and I've talked about it already. I have one change that takes this movie from an okay movie to phenomenal, right? Guardians 3 level. And it's you let Jordan Peele direct this movie.
Probably. You let somebody direct.
You want to talk about race? He's your guy. You want to make it horrific? He's your guy. You want to have it impactful where people will be talking about it for years to come? I'm just saying, that's how you make this movie better.
And
I think I'm with Mark. Let Peele do more of a horror movie.
That's what I'm saying. Make this a horror movie.
I don't know if this is
if
a
we're
horror
gonna
movie.
rewrite it and really truly call it Brave New World, because really it's like, oh, it's not really New World. We just got the vice president taking over.
They literally mark in the movie like it's a brave new
I
world,
know, but it's not.
and I was like, come on.
Like to actually keep that name title, or even the original one, the New World Order, is the kind of rehash what we got in Winter Soldier. Basically, you bring back Hydra, and we're finding out the leader is like going back to your calculating. He's been the one setting it, or that if we're not doing Hydra, we don't do Marvel goes back, doesn't do Secret Invasion, and the whole thing is Sam finding out Skrulls are, and that's our like
I say give us the
episode
Illuminati.
0. Illuminati. What's your storyline there? I want to hear that. Like what
We're already getting incursions.
right.
That's kind of what the end credit scene hinted at. And I want to see like King T'Chaka is still alive, and he's one of the members of the Illuminati. Obviously, you can't bring back T'Challa, but like
No. You could bring back
something
T'Challa.
to that level.
You could just recast him, just like we got
That's
with
true.
Rhodey. Like I don't think that's out of the possibility of happening. And
No,
I think
it's time. Yeah.
and what
I
Jarrett's
think you
saying is
discredit
you could
all
bring
of Wakanda Forever
right.
if you do that.
Well, if no one knows that T'Challa has been part of the Illuminati because he and the Illuminati have figured out, hey, there's something way bigger coming, and they've been preparing
That's a
for
good point.
that. Or we get
And
that,
they faked his death or whatever.
or
Yeah, I
exactly.
get it.
Or like Wakanda had to
Yeah.
fake his death if he got if the incursion sucked him into a different universe.
This is the
all that's
third
possible.
time I've attempted to talk about the Red Hulk fight. We are actually going to talk about the Red Hulk fight now.
Ah, fine.
So he turns into Red Hulk in front of all these cameras, press, and I think my favorite part of this is just how all the Secret Service people look at him and then turn around and just start shooting at him.
Right,
Yeah.
like, hey,
I gotta tell you, that was pretty funny.
like how have you not seen videos on YouTube in this world of like, hey, nothing really penetrates the Hulk, so maybe just run if you see a Hulk. You just run.
yeah, no kidding.
Okay, the thing that took me out of this fight is when they get on top of the building and there's just like two Secret Service guys right on the edge just chilling right there already. Or like
I
just
don't
run
get it.
into the scene. I was like, where the hell did they come from? Did they have jetpacks?
No, I think the
Yeah.
reality is they're probably on top of the White House protecting the president.
But we
For
didn't
sure.
get
Because that's
but again,
what they do.
we didn't get to see that, Max. So then now
I agree. No, oh Mark, I'm just playing you and you're playing me. We're doing each other's
we're
roles
in
here.
each other's skins. How about that?
Yeah, I think this fight was great, guys. Look, I hate the way it ended, and we'll get to that in a sec. But let's just talk about the choreography. I think the fight was awesome. I think it showcased Cap's abilities. I think Red Hulk looked menacing. It was nice to see a Hulk that hasn't been like kind of
Nerfed.
Hulk lately is kind of he's been a little nerfed.
However,
and this one
he
wasn't.
did become Professor Hulk, so clearly he was able to maybe manipulate what he would look like.
I think it was just nice to get a return to form of a Hulk, and he looked
Right.
like Harrison Ford. I think Harrison Ford was great in this, guys. I think Harrison Ford was awesome.
I-
Even Isaiah
yeah, I-
Bradley, they
yeah.
were great.
I'm with you.
I loved it. I have nothing bad to say about it other than how it ended.
And you could keep, even as old as Harrison Ford gets, you can just have him just always be Red Hulk. So,
I agree. I loved this fight until the end. And as I said earlier, I was anticipating someone showing up. I was like, oh my gosh, is Hulk going to show up with Betty? Is he going
Right.
to bring Betty there?
like
And
the
you're
part
gonna
where,
think he's
where
gonna
we
fight
get
Hulk, but it's Betty?
the concrete lifted off of Sam, like that's
Yeah.
the Hulk pulling out. Like, yeah, that would have been a good point. Like, he didn't help with the fight, but he showed up.
Yeah, he showed up ready to help, but Sam's like, no, I got it.
Yeah.
Signaling to the audience that people were there, but then he really stopped him. I did not like that
With
Sam
words.
just basically used the power of friendship the
Hey,
the
you know
power
what?
of family to stop him. I
We've
think that
been
was
mad
ridiculous.
about this for a while. Like, hey, sometimes just a conversation, a heartfelt conversation, can maybe stop some conflict. You don't have to, end with fists.
Oh yeah,
and
I've been
gunfire.
mad about that. You think I've been sitting around mad about
No,
that?
I'm
in
no,
Marvel
I'm saying
movies?
like that's in the royal we. You and I have talked about this. How some stuff in not just MCU but other movies we watch or TV shows where it's like a simple conversation doesn't escalate the problem. It actually ends.
But he's the Hulk. The conversation is escalated.
I don't know what you want from me.
I don't think you could de-escalate that situation. Is what
Sam
I'm saying.
can. We've seen him as a therapist and someone that has deep conversations
True.
with people.
That's true. That's true.
Just
That's
because
true.
he has the powers in Naruto doesn't mean he means.
I just didn't like it.
Or Naruto.
I get
Wow, why did I
the
say
scene.
Naruto?
It's a pretty tropey scene. Was not thrilled with it. I loved the fight. I loved that Hulk was ripping him to shreds. And again, Jarret, I wish they would have really dialed in on, man, am I good enough for this? That would have made that scene so much better, in my opinion. Instead, it flipped on Ross, and I I think what makes Civil War so special is that Captain America's foil is Tony, and that's where their paths cross, and that's what makes that conflict so good. I think they attempted to do that in this movie. That's why they started with Ross. I think they wanted him to be the Tony in this, and that's why they promoted it the way they did. And I just don't think it landed. That's why I give it a 4 out of 6.
That's too bad, Max. Yes, Max has an opinion.
Hey, Isaac, edit in the world's smallest violin right here, just for Max.
I love it. I also love that it's a 5 out of 6, but Jarret agrees with everything I've said so far.
Yeah,
That's
it's
what I
wild.
love.
It's a brave new world, Max.
That was hilarious when he looked at the camera. He's like, "It's a brave new world," and I was like,
What
"Good.
if he did that and then went boom?
Boom, boom, 5 boobs for Brave New World."
I think there are very few instances where like they say the title and it works. This was not one of them. This was not.
This is not
Oh,
it.
guys, we had a real Captain America Civil War, didn't we?
Yeah.
Bradley's exonerated. That was an awesome scene. I'm so glad that Sam went right from that fight to him. I think that was awesome.
Yeah.
Wilson obviously visits Torres, tells him about the Avengers, which you talked about earlier, Mark. The Adamantium Treaty is ratified. So we'll see what the ramifications of that in the MCU are moving forward. Ross resigns and is imprisoned at the Raft, where Betty visits him. I loved this scene. This was awesome. I was curious if she would show up Liv Tyler again. I think it was brilliant. I loved it, and it made that Red Hulk fight, the way it ended, I can stomach it with how it ended. I'm okay with it, because I think Betty coming back was great.
I'm with you. I think that was a cameo that needed to happen. If they didn't do that, then this movie was kind of all for naught, right? Like the impetus of change for him was,
Yeah, he needed a redemption arc.
I don't want to die and not be able to look my daughter in the eyes. And the phone call wouldn't have cut it, especially after he hulked out. They had to have her come back for this. And I like that it happened in the Raft. Like, he was showing humility. We got to see, like, this is a dude who willingly threw himself in the same prisons that he designed to torture the Avengers, basically. Yeah, I thought it was poetic.
Agreed. Before we get into the post-credit scene that I despise, Mark, percentage chances that Thunderbolt Ross appears in the movie Thunderbolts as Red Hulk?
One would think that maybe after his fallout with Captain America, after their Avengers thing, that he gets that ball rolling. But then we gotta get Madame Hydra. How does she get involved in that? So, or like you said, like we've talked about before, is the asterisk S for Thunderbolt not the real title of this movie? Like, are we, after the movie comes out, we're gonna get a different title for this movie?
They're Dark Avengers. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm borderline willing to bet money on it at this point.
Like, that's
now
gonna
that,
be the real
especially
title
now that
after.
this movie was about Avengers,
Right.
it's got to be either the New Avengers or Dark Avengers. It's one of those two things. It has to be. Makes sense.
It's not the Dark Avengers.
I don't know, man. The way the Marvel's been lately, I don't know.
Maybe this will be the Defenders of this.
Oh, that would be worse. That
Would be worse.
Ew,
That'd be
icky.
tough.
I like it was the Thunderbolts. It doesn't make sense if Thunderbolt Ross is
Well,
not
Max,
involved.
What are the odds?
Why would they
Power
call
Fish shows
themselves
up
that?
in Thunderbolts?
Go ahead, Mark.
Odds Power Fish shows up in Thunderbolts.
1 in 3 trillion.
Okay. What about Iron Fist?
I don't think he will be in it, but it does make me wonder watching those trailers, like, how are they going to hang with the Void? I don't know how you hang with the Void. I like that they've painted themselves in that corner for clarity. I really like that.
Yeah.
But also, part of the reason I really hate the power of family and friendship thing they kind of did was I think that's the only way you're taking down the Void. And so you got to make that work right after this Captain America movie. To do that back to back, that's going to be tough on audiences.
The Sentry Void thing is like a very broken psyche, and I think you have exactly the right people to handle that. I think you have Bucky, who is like literally had his mind ripped apart and then pieced back together in Wakanda. And yeah, like you said, that's literally the only thing they can do, because not a single person right now can stand toe to toe with Sentry.
No.
Let alone Void.
Right. So I will say I was not interested in Thunderbolts a couple months ago. I was like, whatever.
All in now.
This new trailer from them, they did it. They
Yeah.
did it with the new trailer.
Yeah.
They did it. Showcasing the Void was a wise choice.
Him just like, yeah. Oh,
yeah, that was great. And them walking into the shadow,
yeah.
that's terrifying.
How do you okay?
Terrifying.
If we can go back to the final credit scene with the leader being on the what was it called? The Raft?
The Raft.
Yeah.
What are our chances now that he's clearly going to break out of that and probably with the other villains and then form their, like, I forget what they call it in the MCU. Do they have a name
Masters
for
of
it?
Evil.
Yeah, form their Masters of Evil. Because one would think that if they don't break each other out, Doctor Doom does. Because he needs them to be wreaking havoc.
Stop
On Earth.
using great storylines, Mark. There's no way they're going to do it unless they accidentally fall into it.
Well, maybe they need to accidentally fall into this podcast and be like, oh, these guys have a great idea. Maybe we should hire them.
I'll tell you what, the adamantium thing that you guys are talking about, that makes me wonder if they're even capable of thinking of an idea like this.
It's so fun. Dude, like, you stumbled into the fact that you guys have had a Celestial sitting in the ocean for... How long ago did Eternals come out? Like 5 years ago? 4 years ago?
A while
Like
ago.
2022.
Painful.
Painful.
Max, you got me worked up.
I'm sorry. Post-credit scene, I hated it. It's not good.
2021.
I think the writing was trash. I think the scene didn't make any sense. I understand the motivation they're doing. I get maybe why Sam Wilson would come back and talk to him, I suppose. It just doesn't make much sense to me. Felt very shoehorned in, but it sets up the multiverse. And apparently the multiverse is going to happen.
Yeah.
Or it has to happen at this point. And I just, it's going to suck.
What if
those
he was
movies aren't good,
referring to
guys.
whatever signal the Ten Rings were shooting out? It
I
has
think
nothing.
that's a dead dream now, Mark. I think
Okay.
that was the plan with Kang, but I don't trust anything they did during the Jonathan Majors era.
Okay.
I think they backpedaled too fast and too quick, and I think you nailed it earlier. You can recast.
Yeah.
And I love the RDJ casting. I'm on record of saying that. You could do both, though. You could do both.
And there's been rumors that Jonathan Majors might come back, so they might do both.
Well, and yeah, and if he was innocent and he was wrongly accused, I think he has the right to come back. I'm not saying he is or isn't. I'm just saying his stuff all of a sudden ended. If he was wrongly accused, then I think Marvel has an obligation to do it. That's what they did with James Gunn, and everybody got excited about Guardians 3.
If you do have to recast him, you have the easiest out because it's built into the story that you've built anyways.
It's so easy. Yeah.
You have the Young Avengers. Iron Lad is a part of that, who we find out is Kang as a child. And that version of Kang changes history. Suddenly you have a new version of Kang out there.
I agree.
Yeah.
Even I'll go as far as this. They just recast Thunderbolt Ross. Just do a new group of Kangs. Keep the same costumes and just go with it.
Yeah.
We all get it. We all would understand it.
And we already did it with Rhodey. Granted, it was in the beginning, but it happened.
Yeah, but like I agree. Didn't like the post-credit scene. But you loved it, Mark. I'm glad you did.
Well, to me, the reason why I loved it is because it was actually like, oh, finally, an end credit scene that I've been complaining they haven't done forever that actually pushes
Fair.
the storyline. Like,
That is fair. That is a fair piece of feedback.
it wasn't another Pizza Papa. We didn't get
That's
a Pizza
fair.
Papa.
That's a good point.
What do you want? This is
That's
what I wanted. Pushing the narrative.
I want it to be done with intentionality and strategy. And I think what this movie shows me is I don't know if they've got that.
He wanted Leader and Captain America getting shawarma in the raft.
And maybe
That's all he was asking for.
I wanted Leader to hit himself in the face for 7 days straight.
Yep.
That's what I wanted.
Oh my god!
But the Pizza Papa thing, that's a fair point, Mark. Just for clarity. I get what you're saying.
Would you like it better if the leader pulled out like a graphing calculator and was like, here's my calculation of the multiverse?
Yeah.
Actually, funny you say that. I would love it if he's drawn like on the walls behind him.
Yeah.
And he's
actually,
like, what are you drawing?
Oh, that's fair.
I kind of did that.
Okay, hang on. Now
I kind of did
come
that,
back.
actually.
So now the end credit scene, now that we've rewritten it and made it better, but I'm going to go off of that idea, is we get there, we see Sam like walking in, like he's going to go talk to the leader, and then just see like this crazy, like horrific, look on his face, and then the leader turns around, and we get like a Hannibal Lecter type of scene, where it's just like, hey, what's coming is going to kill us all. And then they, boom, end.
And have it be with his blood.
Yeah.
Like, it's like so crazy. I'm telling you, man, there were ways to do this where it wasn't them green screened, clearly not in the same room. There were ways to do this, guys.
Yeah.
This post-credit scene was not it. But to your point, Mark, it was not another Pizza Popper scene. Therefore, I am obliged to say it's one level better.
It's not a bad CGI third eye.
I will give it a 2 out of 6, therefore. I will not give it a 1 out of 6 out of honoring you have set a very fair standard of what is a 1 out of 6 post-credit scene
Right.
in terms of setting the future up. Or Doctor Strange, where it's just like, oh, look, Rick and Morty, let's open up an interdimensional portal in the middle of the road.
Credit scene, the Pizza Papa things from Doctor Strange.
Yeah, they both.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand. I'm just saying, like, even the incursion thing
Yeah.
with Clea, it's like, oh, when's she coming back? I haven't seen her in a while. Like, who the heck is she?
And we got the horrible. I
That too. Yeah, that was.
I
horrible,
hated
too.
that so much.
But even like Hercules in Thor: Love and Thunder, it's like, we ever
Yeah.
going to see that guy? Like,
Maybe.
there's just certain things that have happened where I'm like,
Or
I don't know, I
Mordo
wanna
is
see these
ever coming
people.
back. With the incursion, all that stuff happening, I've heard dozens of rumors that with Spider-Man 4 is where we're going to get Venom, or not Venom, or we're going to get Tom Holland turning into Venom, a version of it, and Null being the villain, and like a multiverse of the Spider-Verse in live action is going to happen. Has been
That'd
what
be
I've
great.
been seeing on the rumors.
I'm in. Sony at least knows, if it's got a multiverse, Sony knows how to do it, unless it's Venom.
Or Kraven the Hunter.
If they've got
Morbius,
Spider-Man
Madam Web.
and multiverse, they can do it.
Or Madam Web.
I do not count that. They did not have Spider-Man in that. There we go.
They-
Therefore,
Spider-Man.
it does not count in the equation. So,
Rough.
all right. Well, we're going to wrap this up. We thought we were going to go short, but we went an hour. So how about that?
That's hot. Let's go.
This is always how it goes. Mark, thank you for being on today.
I'm happy. And one last thought, with Captain America's suit being ripped apart, that means we get a brand new suit next time we see him, and it's going to look amazing.
I hope it's from Wakanda, too. I really
I
appreciate
would
it.
imagine it would be like, hey, guys, you know, the suit you made me, Hulk ripped it apart.
Hey! Hey!
I just
He's the Fonz now.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. Jarret, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Again, still feel like a weird third wheel to this relationship you guys have going on, but I'm glad I was here.
Well, Infinity Bros Universe, wherever you listened, however you listen, thanks for making us part of your podcast experience. You can check us out on all sorts of social media platforms. If you're a Magic the Gathering fan, please check out our content on these social media platforms, especially. Robbie is going to be at Chicago Con as probably this is being released, so make sure you check that out. And just get involved in the conversation. What did you think of Captain America Brave New World? Let us know. Shoot us an email at theinfinitybrospodcast@gmail.com. As always, we love you guys 3000. We'll see you soon. See ya. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Infinity Bros podcast. You can find the Infinity Bros on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube at The Infinity Bros. You can also check out our website at theinfinitybros.com for links, reviews, and sweet merch. Feel free to send us listener feedback via social media or email at infinitybrospodcast@gmail.com.